So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's indeed an honor for me to be asked to address such a large group. When I was a student, whenever I am asked to speak, my legs would shiver. So I would always used to stand behind a podium so that nobody can see me. And today I'm so glad that you cannot see my legs. The topic today is dealing with depression. Yes, today I read somebody who said, I feel depressed talking about depression. Well, depression is sometimes depressing, but today we are going to talk about depression. And talking, in fact, is one of the ways to come out of depression. So let's talk about depression today. I wonder how many of you recognize this person, Andreas Lubitz. A few years ago, he was a pilot of the German Wing Airlines, and he crashed the aircraft, killing all the 150 in the French Alps. Later, it was found that he was suffering from depression. And Robin Williams, many of us know him for his role in the movies like Mrs. Doubtfire, Patch Adams, and made millions laugh. But unfortunately, he committed suicide. The latest has been Sushant Singh Rajput, we know, who committed suicide. Another famous person, Deepika Padukone, fortunately, she was bold enough to come out and talk about her own depression. She did not commit suicide. In fact, her talk about the depression that she suffered had helped many people. So talking is good. How common is this depression? Depression can in fact affect anyone, young or old, any age. 10% of the population is affected by depression, they say. Unfortunately, 2/3 of the people do not seek treatment. That is sad. And people with depression are 4 times at risk to develop heart attack. And if someone develops heart attack, they are 3 times more likely to die of heart attack if they are depressed. And 25% of the people with cancer are likely to develop depression. And 10 to 27% of people with stroke develop depression. Twice the number of women than men have depression. The World Health Organization estimates that over 264 million people worldwide suffer from depression. And it's a major contributor to global disease index and the 3rd leading cause of global disability. And it is estimated that now it's the 3rd leading cause. In another 10 years, will reach the 2nd position. And Indian situation is no better. An average of 1.5 to 2% at any time they suffer from depression. To go as a perspective, if each district had an average population of 15 to 20 lakhs, 25 to 30,000 people in each district will need care for depression. So that's how common depression is. And depression is associated with high suicidality. 50 to 70% of all suicides are due to depression. And the government of India estimates that 120 million suicide occurs every year in India. And the commonest cause of death in 15 to 13 age group is depression or suicide. That means there's one suicide occurring every 5 minutes. And India is the 6th highest in the world for women suicides. So you see how common and how severe a problem it is. Do you think depression is a modern problem? Depression has been known to mankind throughout history. There are descriptions of depression in many ancient documents, including the Bible. Well-known people have battled depression. As old as Hippocrates, the father of medicine before Christ, he suffered from depression. Abraham Lincoln used to have episodes of depression. Charles Dickens, famous writer, Leo Tolstoy, and this famous man, Sir Winston Churchill, used to have periods of depression. He used to call my black dog has come to me. He used to describe the depression that way. And famous writers like C.S. Lewis, Charles Spurgeon, they all suffered from depression. Now, how do we recognize depression? One symptom, of course, common symptom is sadness and crying, being gloomy, a disinterest in everything. Anhedonia. Anhedonia means inability to enjoy the things that we enjoyed before. For example, I liked driving before, now I don't enjoy driving anymore. I like to watch TV or play games before, now I don't enjoy that anymore. That is anhedonia. Psychomotor retardation simply means slowing of thinking and slowing of movements. That includes lack of concentration. They become very slow. There are three symptoms which often go unrecognized. That is called the cognitive triad, described by Aaron Beck. Aaron Beck said, these three symptoms, cognitive triad, one is ideas of hopelessness, second is ideas of helplessness, and the third is ideas of worthlessness. Helplessness means person feels that I'm not able to do anything, even ordinary things I can't do. Person feels worthless. These three can be described in another way: negative ideas of self, negative ideas of surrounding, and negative ideas of future. Very often people have guilt, and often unnecessary guilt, and when they are depressed. Strangely, Indians don't seem to suffer much from guilt when they are depressed as compared to the Western population. Rather, Indians come with a lot of physical symptoms, backache, headache. People come with a lot of physical symptoms when they are depressed. So in any common outpatient department, nearly 20 to 25% of the people who come there with physical problems, in fact, have depression. We call this depression as major depression. But in this major depression, there's another subtype, a severe depression called melancholia. It used to be called endogenous depression. It's a more severe type of depression. This depression has a few other additional symptoms. In addition to this disinterest, they have usually loss of appetite, and consequently they'll have loss of weight, and also they have constipation. And insomnia, inability to sleep, especially early morning awakening. Unusually they wake up much earlier in the morning and then they cannot go to sleep. Very often they don't have difficulty in getting sleep, but once they sleep, they wake up early in the morning and they can't sleep after that. And disinterest in sex. These symptoms, if it is present along with the depression, then that indicates melancholia is a severe subtype of depression. In addition to this, there's an interesting symptom called diurnal variation. The person feels most depressed in the morning and less depressed in the evening. Again, next morning he is depressed, and the evening better. So morning, when he wakes up, he's depressed. By afternoon, evening, begins to get better. This is called diurnal variation, a symptom of this melancholia. Well, what will happen if depression is not dealt with? Most of the depressions will eventually subside, but there is one danger of depression, and that is the risk of suicide, or in today's iPhone language, we can say, I quit. Suicide is a big risk in depression. Then there's a milder type of depression called dysthymia. A pessimism, a low self-esteem, low-grade chronic depression. Now the question is, why do we get depressed? Let me try to explain to you in a simplistic way with these diagrams. Look at this picture. This is a picture of a normal man. Do you agree? I can almost hear many of you saying, yes, but what is this on top of his head? Well, on top of his head is stress. Don't we all have some stress or the other? Is there anyone without any stress? So would you agree? Now agree that this is a picture of a normal man? All of us have some stress, but we go about life with a smile. We are able to manage. We are not depressed, right? Yes. Now look at this person. He is depressed. Why is he depressed? Wow, he has got a lot of load of stress to carry. He is not able to carry, therefore he is depressed. And look at this third person. He is also depressed. And what about his load? Well, it's almost the same as the load of a normal person, isn't it? It's almost the same. But then why is he depressed? If you look carefully, you'll notice that he's a much smaller person than the normal person. Well, not in body size, but in his personality. His personality is not mature. He has not developed his personality enough to cope with the ordinary stresses of life that we all face every day, and therefore he gets depressed. So to summarize, we can summarize in 2 words. The cause of depression is either too much of stress or immature personality. Well, that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but there are multiple causes of depression, and they often interact with each other. One of the first things to consider is the heredity, genetics. Then the environment. When I say environment, I don't mean the trees and the clouds, but environment at home, environment in the school, in the office, all this is put together. So much of stress, people can become depressed. Or if you are in a particularly abusive environment, that will be an additional cause for people to get depressed. Life events, important events in life such as exams for students, bereavement, strangely, even a happy incident like getting married, sometimes that can trigger people into depression. We can say the causes in the 3 categories: physical causes, physiological causes, and psychological causes. When we talk about physical causes, apart from the diseases, there's this genetic and biological causes we need to consider. Depression can be due to biochemical problem in the brain. This is what we need to understand. Many people may not know this. Due to biochemical problem in the brain, without any external cause, people can become depressed. You see, in the brain, in the deep inside the brain, there's an area called the limbic system, comprises of all these organs there. That area is responsible for our emotion. Many of the psychiatric problems happen because of problems in this limbic system. Now, I'll have to tell you a little bit about the anatomy of the nervous system. You see, our brain, the basic unit of the nerves in the brain is called a neuron, the nerve cell. Nerve cell looks like this. This one, which looks like a spider, is the nerve cell. It's got a lot of hands, and see, one long hand is coming and connecting with the hand of another nerve cell, another neuron. And this is a very important area. This area is called a synapse, or the nerve junction is called a synapse. Now, look at this nerve junction in a magnified way. We call it a junction, but you notice that it's not really touching each other. There is a gap. So how can it be a junction? In my grandfather's house in Kerala, which was surrounded by rivers, olden times, nowadays we have bridges across all the rivers, but in olden times, when you come by a bus, we'll have to get down when you reach the end of the road, and then get onto a boat and travel by boat, reach the next side, and then catch the next bus and go. Nerve transmission is somewhat like this. A nerve impulse comes like this up to here, then it has to go via these chemicals, like the boat, and reach the next side, stimulate this nerve, and the nerve impulse goes on. This is how neurotransmission takes place. If these chemicals are less, that is a cause for depression. Because when the chemicals are less, this nerve transmission becomes slower or lesser. You see, our brain is full of nerves, billions of nerves. For our thought, our mood, all this pass through the nervous connections. So when the chemicals are less, that can lead to depression. Then the physiological causes. Physiological causes means the normal physiology in our body, like menarche, time when the periods start, pregnancy, and delivery. And during delivery time, many women, nearly 10 to 15% of women develop depression. That's called postpartum depression. It's an important depression, postpartum depression. And also during menopause. These physiological changes in the body, especially women, is a vulnerable time to get depression. Then the psychological causes, like threats, actual or perceived threats, losses. When I say losses, not just the material loss, loss of people, loss of prestige, loss of name, loss of business, anything. Then important life events like divorce, traumas, all these are stresses. Interpersonal problem is an important area of stress. In fact, one of the commonest source of stress is interpersonal problems. Then chronic stresses. Look at this. Mother with many children. She has reached her wit's end. Not just one day, but every day. Chronic stress can lead to depression, or an abusive environment can lead to depression. So do we say that stress will always lead to depression? Not necessarily. The fire which melts butter hardens eggs. The same fire does both. Depends upon the personality. Some people get depressed, some people get stronger with each stress. Seligman, he described a condition called learned helplessness. He did an experiment with a dog. See, the dog stands here, the dog gets electric shock on this. But if he comes here, there's no shock in this area. But the dog stands and getting shock, looks at this area and thinks that it is the same like this area, therefore doesn't make an attempt to cross over to a safe side and stays there and suffers. This is called learned helplessness. Learns that I am helpless, I cannot change the situation. This happens in real life. You know, people fail once or have one difficulty, they think every time I will fail. That is called learned helplessness. That's one of the causes for depression. Very often, we are bound by our belief system, what we believe, and not the reality. How a person feels depends often on how a person thinks. Let's look at an example. Somebody steps on your toes in the bus. How will you feel? Well, you may feel very angry at the person. You want to shout at the person. But you look up and see who this person is and find that it was a blind man. Oh, then what happens to your anger? Your anger goes off. You may feel sorry for the person. You may even feel a little guilty for feeling angry. But you still have the same pain. Pain has not gone. But your anger has changed. Why? Because of the way you think about it. So it's not often the situation that causes depression, but our evaluation of that situation that makes us feel depressed or angry. Anger itself, in fact, Sigmund Freud said, anger turned against oneself is the cause for depression. Disappointment, feelings of revenge, repressed guilt, all this can turn to depression. Some of the risk factors for depression, we already said, gender. Twice the number of women are depressed as compared to men. Why? We don't know the exact reasons, but some of the possible reasons are the willingness of the women to accept their emotional symptoms and talk about it. They are more ready to seek treatment. They have multiple roles to handle at home and outside. And they are more sensitive to interpersonal relationship. And they have frequent hormonal changes in their body. These are some of the reasons why more women are depressed than men. Then marital factors. You may think that marriage is a cause for depression, but in fact, marriage is a protection against depression. More people who are divorced or separated, they are more depressed than people who are married together. Some are married as some protection. Marriage, it can be stressful, agree, but in general, marriage seems to have some protection against depression. The other factors are age. The peak of depression is usually in the middle ages. In old age, many problems people get, along with the depression also increases as they grow old in old age. They need not get depression, but many people get. If you have had a previous episode of depression, the more risk of getting another episode of depression. We already said about heredity, family history of depression. If you have, more chance of getting depression. Early childhood trauma before the age of 11 is one of the causes for developing depression later in life. Poor coping skills, you have not learned enough coping skills in childhood, you can become depressed with a small amount of failure in adult life. One research showed that unemployment for more than 6 months in the last 5 years is one of the causes for people becoming depressed. So many causes like that. Now, can depression be treated? I would say with a resounding yes. Yes, it can be treated. There are ways to treat severe depression. One is by medicines called antidepressants. Another one called ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, and transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a new treatment. These are some of the ways to treat severe depression. A few words about them. Antidepressants. Remember, this has to be prescribed only by a doctor. A common medicine called fluoxetine, or the US it's called Prozac. It usually takes 3 weeks for the effect to come. It's not like taking a paracetamol, next day your depression is gone. It takes 3 weeks at least for the effect to start. And one has to continue it for 6 to 9 months. And then they can stop it. Usually depression will subside by that time. There are other therapies, as we already said, electroconvulsive therapy or ECT. In common parlance, it's called shock treatment. But many people have a lot of misunderstanding. People really think that it's a shock treatment. So people think that somebody will come and catch you like this and give you shock. No. Far from it. It is a very useful and safe treatment, contrary to popular myth and what is shown in the movies. It is said to be as safe as a normal delivery in a hospital. The exact mechanism of action is not fully known, but a series of 5 to 8 sessions over 3 weeks produces dramatic relief. Sometimes it can make a difference between life and death. A very useful treatment. It is like this. They keep 2 electrodes through a machine. The current is reduced and a small current is passed for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and the person develops a seizure. The seizure lasts for less than a minute, and the person goes back to the ward or goes back home. This is given usually twice or thrice in a week for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and dramatic improvement. In fact, this is the strongest and the best treatment for depression, for severe depression. Dealing with the other causes of depression is dealing with our thinking. Many times when we have negative thoughts, but we need to ask this question: is this a valid conclusion? Is it valid, my negative thinking? Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Anger, if you have any hurt feelings, any feelings of revenge, we need to deal with that. Guilt feeling sometimes. Worried about any sin, you think best thing is to confess it to God. Perhaps you need to confess it to others whom you have wronged. Sometimes we are reluctant to accept the forgiveness. Even when others forgive, we are not able to forgive ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves. Sometimes we have very high expectations, which is impossible to reach. I should never make a mistake. Everything depends on me. These are all, superlative thinking. This last one is called Atlas syndrome. Atlas, Greek mythology, one of the Greek gods. He's supposed to carry the whole world. Sometimes we think we are like Atlas. The whole world rests on my shoulder. We need to realize that is not true. We must always be enthusiastic, or we should always put on a happy face. No, unrealistic. We need to be natural. Dealing with inactivity is a common problem. Many people who are depressed often lack energy and initiative. It is easy to stay in bed or sit alone brooding and thinking about miseries of life. So we need to help them to come out of that. Encourage activities, especially those activities in which they can succeed. That will give them a boost. And dealing with the environment, we need to modify some of our daily routines. We need to reduce workloads whenever possible. Take periodic vacations. We need to have a rhythm of rest and work. Even our own heartbeat, you see, when it pumps the blood for the whole body, the same heart has to relax. Then only it can be filled with blood to pump again. There is a need for rest, the rhythm of rest and work. In returning and rest is your salvation. When you want to counsel somebody who's depressed, often we find they don't want to. They often say, what is the use? No use. Many depressed people have this attitude. Therefore, a counselor needs to play a more active role. He needs to be more optimistic, sincere, and reassuring in his statements. Now, can depression be prevented? Yes. One of the important things I believe is to trust in God. Remember that God is in control. Many who trust in God have found this has helped them to prevent depression. But we must avoid simplistic solutions. Avoid thinking like this, trust in God and depression will just go away. Or people who believe in God should not feel depressed. This is a very simplistic thing. It will be more helpful to say, we are with you in this pain and we are praying for you, even though we don't completely understand it. When we are realistic enough to expect pain, and we are informed enough to know that God is always in control, then we can handle discouragement better and not slip into deep depression. We need to challenge some of our wrong thinking. Sometimes, do I feel I am incompetent? If so, let me check. What is the evidence for the view that I am incompetent? Is there really any evidence, or is it just my thinking? Or if there is anything, how can I become more competent in the areas in this matter? Grief. Now, grief is not depression. It's a natural response to loss or illness. It's different from depression. It's an opportunity, grieving is an opportunity to mourn for the loss and to get healing. And it's important that we go through the normal grieving process. If not, it can lead to depression. How do we have healthy coping skills? We need to develop the ability to feel grief without losing sight of our daily responsibilities. We need to have a sense of proportion. And we need to acknowledge both positive and negative feelings that we have and allow plenty of time to experience the thoughts and feelings. Don't try to escape the feeling of grief. As somebody said, the way in is the way out. You want to solve a problem? The way of that is going into the problem, not trying to escape the problem. Be helpful to confide in a trusted person. Express your feelings openly and appropriately, and don't be ashamed of crying. And write a journal, write every day how I feel. And meet with others in the same boat. Take the example of this Alcoholics Anonymous group. They have a group for themselves that has been very helpful for many of them to stay sober. Creation of a caring community is an indirect way to prevent depression. King David, the olden time of Israel, who has written many psalms, says, the psalm is very familiar to many people. Psalm 23 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. That confidence that helps us to hold on in times of depression. Millions of people have received comfort from this verse. The valley experience, the mysteries of human sufferings are beyond our grasp. Yet God invites us into them. God often uses human suffering to change us. In the valley, we struggle and grasp for answers. God desires to lead us to the point where we can trust Him in the midst of our suffering. My times in the valley expose the depths of who I am, what I really believe about God, what I really believe about life, what I really believe about myself. Battles may leave us scarred, wounded. But if I find what God is offering me, I leave the battle with deeply understood truth about who I am and who God is. Such truth leads me into new levels of trust. So the valley experience is that surely such a God who would walk with me through the valley, who corrects me at times, who comforts me often, surely He is worthy of my trust. So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I know you are with me. Always remember, you may be depressed today, but soon you will come out of it. Your depression will turn out to gladness in due time. So, usually when we end the talk, we say the end. But I don't want to say the end. This is not the end for depression. There is life after depression. You can come out of depression. Thank you for your patient listening.